Special Rapporteur David Boyd coming to our hub more often. There's no space to sit. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of you coming to join us for this event. I'll give a moment for all of you to get a proper seat so we are comfortable. It's going to be about an hour session. Please join in. So I'm just going to get started. See everybody here. So thank you so very much to everybody. Please take a seat. There are some empty seats here in the front, so please do not feel shy. We know to invite you. So please, there are some seats here, or you can take the split seats at the back. How are you seated comfortable? So thank you so very much once again for joining us today. We are here at the CBD COP 15 to ensure that the end of 19th we have a very inclusive, just human rights-based global biodiversity framework in a week, in actually less than a week. Something. And here has a human face. We are going to have David Boyd with us, Special Rapporteur of the Environment, and he has been very supportive all over all 3 years. So David, it's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much. That's it. So today's event, we wanted to kind of bring about David. Anyway, first let's give a short introduction about you.
I don't really want to give a short introduction about myself, but I will say thank you, Tina, for the invitation. It's fantastic working with Women for Biodiversity, and all the work that all of you do is so inspiring. And really, I couldn't do the work I do without the work that you do. So a big thank you. I also wanted to say I'm from Canada. I live on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish Nation on the west coast, and I'm honored to be here on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee Nation. So I just wanted to say that introduction.
Thank you so much. So today's event is actually basically David. I think we also have a turn up because maybe they all want to ask you about it. So the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, Dr. David Boyd, also undergoing the process or has already prepared a report on women, girls, and their right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, a right recognized in 2021 by the UN Human Rights Council Resolution 4813. And this actually, the input was called in sometime in September this year. And the purpose of it was for the Special Rapporteur's analysis to also be presented the Human Rights Council next year in March 2023. So we wanted to have this opportunity for all of you to know about that report, know the purpose for it, and also to let you know about its work at the Human Rights Council next year. So I'm just going to start with this question with you. Like, I know you have this report that you'll be presenting. What was the focus? What was the drive behind it?
There's a couple of drivers, actually. One is I have a 16-year-old daughter who is a climate activist and is always on my back about the importance of really highlighting the role of girls and women as leaders in the climate movement. And we had a conversation about 1.5 years ago where she said to me, Papa, you're a sexist. And I was like, what? I tried so hard to be a feminist and support women and girls. The work that I do with women from it. But she said, it's not your fault. You're part of a system. And for me, it was really it was hard to take that from my daughter, but also as I reflected on it, I realized how right she was. And then subsequent to that, I was having a conversation with the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, who's an absolutely heroic woman. And she said to me, how are we ever going to find the solutions when half of humanity isn't even given a chance to participate in identifying and implementing those solutions? And so those two conversations really planted seeds in my mind. And I thought, with this recognition that everyone has the right to live in a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, really, I believe one of the most critical human rights for the 21st century, I thought it's time to do a report that really focuses on not only on the disproportionate impacts of the triple planetary crisis on women and girls, which we all, I'm sure, are aware of, but also on how can we eventually take the steps to empower women and girls and transform the patriarchal system so that we can achieve a just and sustainable future. So that's fairly ambitious, but that's why I'm doing this report on women and girls and the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment.
Thank you, David. I'm going to applaud you for that. I think it also comes at a very opportune time because this is also help us to strengthen the work not only of the CBD convention, but as hopefully in all UN MEAs to have this council report. We always look for those reports to kind of also emphasize our own advocacy work. So I think like all of you are here and attending the CBD COP 15. And as you also notice that one of the discussion around here, around especially the BBIS part, right, and also advocating for this recognition to be embedded into the framework. And so what do you feel about it? A few reflections.
So now that we have this United Nations resolution from the General Assembly, the challenge ahead of us is to take those inspiring words on paper that we all have this right, and we have to make it real for people. And so implementation, and also just to be consistent. Like we have to ensure that the right to a healthy environment it was included in the decision document from Sharm el Sheikh at COP27. There's a fantastic new report from the United Nations Committee on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women on the rights of indigenous women and girls. And it's the first time a UN committee, one of these expert bodies, has specifically included a section on the right to a healthy environment. So that's really important. We can use that tool to protect the rights of women and girls, indigenous women and girls. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child is currently working on a general comment on children's rights, climate change, and the environment. And their draft general comment, which is now available for public input, includes a really strong section on children's right to a healthy environment. So those kinds of tools at the international level, I think, can be used by all of us. And ultimately, that's what human rights are, right? They're tools. If you look at the way that the anti-slavery movement used equality, freedom to bring about the end of slavery, the way that the women's rights movement has used human rights to make incredible strides. And I think now that we face this triple planetary crisis, we need to harness the right to a healthy environment to bring about similar changes. And it can really be used by every different type of person in every different country in the world. It's going to be harder in some countries than others, but really my role at the UN is to just keep pushing this forward. And I'll give you an example of how it's been useful. There's a community in South Africa in a place called Mpumalanga, which is surrounded by coal mines and coal-fired power plants that has really terrible air quality, which affects everybody, but also women and especially children who are dealing with asthma. And some very brave individuals in that community, as part of two environmental justice organizations, used their right to a healthy environment to file a lawsuit against the government of South Africa and say that the failure to improve air quality in Mpumalanga is a violation of our right to live in a healthy environment. And just a few months ago, a court in South Africa said, "You're absolutely right. The government of South Africa has violated your rights and must take steps to improve air quality." So that's just one example. I could give you 100 of how people around the world are using this right that can change their lives. And I just to say, not everybody really knows exactly what we mean when we talk about a right to a healthy environment. So let me just clarify. A right to a healthy environment, which has been around for decades in countries around the world. Over 150 countries recognize this right in law. But it includes clean air to breathe. It includes access to safe and sufficient water. It includes health, sustainably produced food. It includes non-toxic environments where we can live, work, study, and play. It includes a safe, livable climate, and it includes healthy ecosystems and biomes. That's a broad range, and those are all things where the global human population faces massive challenges. The right to a healthy environment also comes with the two words that people can use. That's access to information, public participation in environmental decision-making, and access to justice with effective remedies. Those are all human rights that also belong to each and every one of us. And the final point I'll say is that because it's now an internationally recognized human right, that brings in a whole library of human rights principles, including non-discrimination. So the fact that we have discrimination on the basis of sex, gender, race, and ethnicity that affects people's ability to enjoy their right to a healthy environment is not lawful. And we need to say that. We need to say that to states and businesses. They have to fulfill this right equally. And also other human rights principles such as prevention. We need to prevent these problems before they happen, respond to them. And also non-regression, which means we can only move forward. States cannot move backwards. They cannot weaken environments unless they cannot weaken environment systems. And if they do, we need to hold their feet to the fire to every means possible.
I know, thank you, David. And I think what you really talked about, the right to a healthy environment, what it really encompasses, right? So when we're talking about, say, for example, we talk about Target 22, and I know you've been supporting it for so many years now with us, and webinars supported. But that's what we're saying, that we are here at the CBD COP 15, not just asking for hearsay that we want the Target 22 or we want the Gender Plan of Action. Exactly what you're talking about is hoping that having that Target 22 would streamline those aspirations, because the global biodiversity framework is not only about conservation, it's not only about restoration, it has got so many different aspects to that, from marine and coastal biodiversity to living modified organisms to invasive alien species to food security to nutrition. So it really so the COP15 is not only about just one part of what we're looking at 30 by 30 adult people. It's a very small part of the convention. So exactly, I think. So one last question I want to ask you before I think people are really very curious to also ask their own is just on the Target 22. So how would you feel that would strengthen the implementation ways of the GBF?
Yeah, my basic point is we should have a human rights-based approach moving into every aspect of the global biodiversity framework. Target 22, also Target 21, BBIS in the principles section. So it has to be a holistic, systematic approach, right? So that's really what I'm here to push for, and I know that I'll be pushing that agenda forward. I also think it's really important to acknowledge that there is a gender action. There has been a gender action plan. It hasn't been adequately implemented. There's a new, stronger gender plan of action, but really we need to mobilize resources to implement that. And it's really the same challenge we face with respect to the right to a healthy environment. How do we implement this? And we critically need more resources to make that happen. I think it's really important in the context of biodiversity also to acknowledge that, well, first of all, when we're talking about the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, that's important for all of us, right? The fact that plants on land and plankton in the ocean, there's the oxygen in the air we breathe, and that matters to every single being and every form of life on the planet. The fact that we depend on food, we depend on pollinators, birds, bees, bats, and insects, and soil microorganisms. That's relevant for each and every one of us. So that's part of it. But the other reality is that there are people who bear a disproportionate impact of the climate crisis, the loss of biodiversity, and pervasive pollution. And we really need to put their interests first. That's one of the key aspects of the Sustainable Development Goals, is to leave no one behind and really prioritize the rights and the needs of those who are furthest. So, for example, I think about small-scale fishers on the west coast of Africa. Women play a huge role in the small-scale fishing industry. Their livelihoods are being destroyed by massive trawlers off the coast of Africa from foreign countries. And in other island states, the die-off of coral reefs, small-scale fisheries. Indigenous people, we haven't talked about indigenous people, absolutely critical. The science is clear. When indigenous people's rights to their land, their waters, and their territories of life, when those rights are recognized, biodiversity flourishes. The indigenous people's rights have to be at the heart of the 2020 global biodiversity framework. And also, not just indigenous peoples, but, for example, other types of nature-based local communities like the Madras or the Afro-descendant communities in Colombia. So we need to have indigenous peoples, we need to have these nature-dependent local communities. Really, their rights need to be highlighted, respected, and advanced to biodiversity framework. So this is a big challenge and a big opportunity at the same time. Then what's decided by states in the next 5 or 6 days is going to change the lives of literally billions of people on this planet.
Thank you so much. Okay. So I'm going to start to David would presenting at the Human Rights Council, Secure in Geneva, followed up with him. He's going to be there. But also open the floor. This is the floor for our conversations. I also see a hand. Please introduce yourself briefly. And if somebody else raise their hand, you can maybe move.
Thank you so much. My name is Laura. I'm from the American University, and you see, and I have a big friend. Well, for now, the player in this field, and thank you so much for that work. And I think I need to use the agenda. But I'd like to talk about the rhetoric and the situation and gender. And someone who's really in this field, I think I'm just going to show you that I like so many people better. Let's talk about the design issues. That is analyzed by which of the markets is suffer or which rates is finance. Not this out of here, that's okay. Seriously. So,
Hi everyone, this is Laura. I am doing an Frito at U21. And basically my question is how to raise awareness regarding air jurisprudence enforcement and the importance of gender. How we can probably for shame.
So let's take two questions. We can respond and go around with her.
I'll try not to forget the questions, but I also want to say, in addition to questions, I'm also here to listen. And so if you would like to tell me stories, would you like to share your perspective on these issues, please do. The last thing I want to do here is spend all my time talking. I'd rather spend my time listening. So first of all, just want to thank you so much for raising a critically important issue. I have included some aspects of I believe further girls and gender diverse populations and I do think it's an important issue. And we'll see that it's in the research that myself and my team have done, it's very hard to find and I can just actually reinforce what you're saying about being raised. It's very hard to find the studies or research that's been done about the impacts of various aspects of planetary crisis on LGBT. So any academics in the crowd, please, that's an area that really desperately needs attention. They have some limited evidence about adverse effects on LGBT people in the aftermath of climate-related extreme weather events, when they're unable to gain access to shelters, for example, where there's types of violence that elevate during those times. So I really think that's an important issue. In terms of birth jurisprudence and gender equality, well, one thing I will say about birth jurisprudence is birth jurisprudence is kind of an emerging body of law that really makes us rethink our fundamental relationship between humans and the natural world. It says that instead of this kind of crazy misconception which has dominated society for the last centuries, that humans are somehow separate from and superior to nature. Birth jurisprudence says, look, humans are actually just part of nature. We share DNA, a basic building block with every other form of life on this planet. So really we are, in Canada, indigenous people have an expression called worldwide relations. Well, the reality is that's not just a kind of philosophical concept. That's a scientific reality. We are a part of the family of life on Earth. And Earth jurisprudence is trying to inject that scientific reality into our legal systems. One way it does that is through recognition of the rights of nature, which is taking off in countries around the world, and led by Ecuador with its constitution in 2008. It's also found in Bolivia, Colombia, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, Uganda, New Zealand, and the rights of nature and the responsibilities of humans are actually concepts that are not just decades old, but millennia old, because they're at the heart of a lot of the customary indigenous legal systems. That if we fulfill our responsibilities to the land will fulfill our rights in exchange. And so that kind of reciprocity and responsibility focus is something that Earth Jurisprudence is very strong on. And I think one thing I can confess as someone who works in the field of human rights is that we don't talk about responsibilities. We talk about state obligations and business responsibilities, but the reality is that most of us here are from the global north. We have responsibilities because it's our carnivorous appetite for meat that's driving deforestation in the global south. It's our reckless use of plastic that's leading to the plastic problem globally. It's the global north that's exporting pesticides to the south and poisoning hundreds of thousands of people every year. So we have to talk about responsibilities as well as rights.
Thank you, David. I think there'll be much more questions, but just as answer to the first speaker, right? I wonder whether I will be happy to share the call for submission, though the date is gone. But it would be really very relevant. Like I think what David talked about, that the lack of information or data being out there. And actually, in his call for inputs, there was actually a question. This is question number 5, saying, please identify specific ways in which the rights of particular marginalized or vulnerable women around LGBTI persons or should be recognized and protected to enable the realization of the right to a clean, stable environment. So we also really need to know that if we really need to also engage, we also need to be providing the input to then that report then gets built up. So I would maybe also ask, I don't know, I mean, it might be too late, but if people are interested from here to again look at the submission, and maybe you can even take out your own paper out of it and see, how that could be built up. And I think David is here. He'll be happy to hear more research or more study around it. I'm already putting him on a hot spot. But it was asked in his input when the call came out in September. So I don't know how many of them actually addressed that concern, but it would have been maybe, I don't know how many submissions came through for that one. But it's really important. I'm happy to share that's already online. If you just Google it, and maybe some of us could do that, and kind of giving David some more material.
Just to add, so I'm literally working on that report this week during the evenings, and it has to be done next week. But if anybody does have information, please don't hesitate to send it to me. If I can't squeeze it into the report, I can always raise it at the Human Rights Council at large. My email address is just Dr. David Boyd, all one word, drdavidboyd@gmail.com. And my virtual door is always open. So thank you.
So those are opportunities, and hence we're also having this session today to just support everybody. Our process is happening. Let's also stay in touch. So just information sharing. I think information is really important. I'm trying to find some more hands out there. So if you have examples, yes, please come forward. So do please share example stories.
For Mr. Boyd, since you opened the door to share stories and experience, I am like, share something. I'm from the Innu Nation. I'm here in Quebec. We are northeast of Quebec. I'm part of a big delegation of indigenous people that want to protect the caribou right now because it's our staple food. It's like asking a North American to stop eating bread. It's so important to us. That's the most important example I could find. But one of the aspects that's often very hard to make understand is because we're not dying of hunger, but we're dying of the food. Right now, because we have a moratorium that we self-impose on caribou hunting to let the population be able to sustain themselves, we are very much codependent on food that's being brought from the south with trucks with hydrocarbon and it is expensive still. One of the aspects that I want to share as a personal experience, I was part of 30 personality in Quebec that were tested for glyphosate in their urine to see how much we had. And out of the 30 person, I was the second person that had the most glyphosate in its urine after the man that actually works with it on the field. And I don't work near no field, but I was like, where does that come from? And it was the only answer I had was it's food related. I've been educated to eat food, and the accessible food we had was not the less processed. It's the most over-processed, and we have many, many health issues related to that. So diabetes, a lot of, well, very much not very healthy food. And now we have to go from being totally organic food in less than 50 years to a food chain that is not very non-discriminatory. It's our people get less quality food. And now we have to pay an extra fee to have the right not to access to unhealthy food, which we had at the beginning. So what's the problem with that is that since we're not dying of hunger, we're dying of not having access to food, it's not as visible. So often these issues of human rights to food security, even in the north in Canada, are invisibilized by the fact that we have these chains that close each other. But right now, we see the price of food baskets go up. We see that there's jokes right now saying that I put the $100,000 down to get a salad as a down payment because the price of food, and it was already an issue in Canada, in my community, my sister communities, to access to even accessible food. So between an apple and a bag of chips, which one's going to sustain you is not a secret. And we have pictures on Facebook with $75, $85 watermelon and like $120 steaks, because that's the ridiculous price. So I know that because there's differences between indigenous people and the country that colonize them. Often our issues can be invisibilized, but the problem is we see those health issues come up in our community, more cancer, more diabetes, heart issues. So I think that often that's a big problem where it's a slow death, and it's almost like a nice death, you know? We're not being shot, but we're still being put we have to go through this. It's not that bad. So I think those are issues that we'll see as differences. The South and Europe, but are still very much human rights issue. The right to access. Thank you so much for listening. So it was long time.
Thank you so much. I didn't get your name, but please do leave your name and contact in the notebook there, and I'd be happy to also connect. And also, like I said, I'm happy to connect all of you who want with David Boyd. He's opened his doors, he's given his email publicly. So please put in your name. So I'll really make sure that he gets all the participants' name here. I think, David, that's a very interesting point, right? I think this has also been raised here in the CBD is agriculture and nutrition. And what we really talk about, it's not about nutrition, it's not about food security, but rather like food sovereignty and having that right, so that you'd be able to sustain yourself, the communities, because a lot of the communities are the sustainable consumption, right? You're talking about sustainable use, either it could be in the wildlife management you're talking about. And I think it's really very linked to that. I'm just talking with the many hands. Would anybody have any more stories to share? Please think about it and.
Yeah, I can share some of the work that we do in Kenya. So I work with Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association. And just thinking about that right to clean and safe environment, especially for women. So our constitution really highlights, access or to clean and safe environment. And that was translated to the Wildlife Act in Kenya that has supported the formation of conservancies. And conservancies, these are communally or privately owned land that are set aside for conservation. So mostly wildlife conservation, but also other multiple uses. Because it's land, it's very patriarchal. And so the men benefit from both governance and management, and also the benefits from these conservancies. But when you look at it, the 90s, there were like 4 conservancies. Till now, with the support that we're given to communities, conservancies have grown to around 215 over conservancies, and have provided that safe environment because natural resources are managed well. natural resources are not depleted if, the space was just open and people from outside the local community would come and access these natural resources. And yes, there's an issue of that women are not in the governance structures most of the time. But in cases where, women have seen the benefit of having these conservancies, of accessing clean water by ensuring that these conservancies are managed well, they have access to clean water, clean environment because the trees have been left to grow. So I think this aspect of it being a human right and that translating to practice of having conservancies and community really managing their natural resources well, no depletion of natural resources can really translate to women and children accessing clean and sustained environment. But I think we need to do more in terms of women being in those decision-making tables so that they can benefit more from that clean environment. They can also benefit from livelihood that is associated with the conservation of that natural resource. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I'd like to follow up. I have to finish the report by next week, but I'm also doing what I call a good practices annex, which is a compilation of these types of stories from around the world. And I would love to include your story in my good practices annex. So thank you. You've made my day. And I do think that the issue that you've raised, the broader issue around women's ownership of land, is one of the most important questions that there is in terms of realizing the right to a healthy environment, but also realizing a whole spectrum of human rights. And so that's one of the key recommendations I'll be making to the Human Rights Council, is that states have to change the discriminatory laws that prevent women from owning land, that prevent women from inheriting land, that prevent women from bequeathing land. I mean, it's to me, it's like mind-blowing that there's so many countries that still have these discriminatory laws on the books. A report by UN Women indicated that at our current rate of progress, it would take 286 years to remove all of the discriminatory gender discriminatory laws from our books. I mean, obviously, none of us is going to be here in 286 years. We should pick up the pace. I mean, it's just completely unacceptable. And so, thank you for raising that really important point.
Thank you. Yeah. Because we also looking for the headline indicators. So this CBD COP team, reach out to your parties. We want a headline indicator for target 22 to be land rights. This is 582 of the target. This is a reminder to your parties. So yes, in the contact group, the monitoring framework supported to have the binary indicator 582 as a headline indicator. So make sure in the non-paper it's there. Otherwise, get after your parties. Like I said, I think that's an important thing. If you have a right to a healthy environment and tell people, it's very easy. But the way, I think, if I'm indigenous peoples or everybody, right, is that basic. If you don't have rights to land, forget about anything else. Like if you want to decide on what's going to happen or get access to that or stable use of that, forget about all the targets and the goals, because it really comes down to that. Like that's what we're talking about, recognition of indigenous peoples, rights to the lands and territories, including of women. And
I want to share some practices. So the first one is the first one is the Shambria. There's a evidence that they request for the sound part in their forest it is. Now they trade the traditional medicine plants, so they can use these plants, the traditional knowledge as conservate and use them as sustainable thing. So these indigenous peoples are working on this part of the indigenous forest. Their nutrients and traditional forest. So that's one of the in practice. And it's one that there's also conservation area, RBU, that is managed by Diana Espinosa. So she has been doing a lot of research about the Chihuahua group, that's Leptopteryx isabel. That's a species that's endangered in Vietnam. And so it has been a work for years. And lastly, and this last case, the species had been included in the city's convention. Also, I think that good practices in human protecting their lands. One more time. How do you treat this handle?
Thank you. Mine is still on the same topic she was talking about. But my part, I wish to speak about the human right within the context of the Nagoya Protocol, because we, as women, have the right to share the benefits as it comes to society. But in our indigenous people setup, women have been, taking the back seat. And what that means is that you cannot sit at the table to decide first and foremost whether the access should happen. And when that is taken away already, remember, to get justice, substantive justice, and procedural rights. So when that doesn't happen, when the negotiations about the benefits take place again, you're still not there, and when the benefits come, and you're still not sitting at the table, you do not get the benefits. So the question then is, how will you invest in any resources where you do not have any benefit? Because maybe when the benefits come, depending on the way the society is stratified, the money goes to the men on these priorities that maybe don't include women, or women are the last ones. So that too affects women, and it takes away their right to decide what happens with their resources. And some of those resources are traditional medicine, like she says, which they manage. So it would be good to also address that as a key component in implementation of the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And in my report, I really focus on the importance of, first of all, listening to the voices of women, but second of all, ensuring that there is full and inclusive participation in all climate and environmental policy making and action. And I think to get to that level of equality, we're a long way from that, right? We know that only 1 in 4 elected parliamentarians is female. We know that only 1 in 6 environment ministers is female. We know that only 1 in 11 CEOs of large corporations is female. And yet, we also know that where women are in those decision-making places, where they have the power, then great things happen for all of us, right? We know that when women are involved in water stewardship, water is used more efficiently. When women are involved in forest management, forests are conserved better and used more accurately. We know that when women are in charge of corporations, they're more likely to do things like report their carbon emissions. When women are in parliament, then those parliaments are more likely to sign and ratify international environmental agreements. When women are when women's rights are recognized, respected, and fulfilled, women make different decisions than men. And so I think that it's just critically important that access to information, quality and participation, and where those rights are not being respected, access to justice. We have to make sure that women have that, women and girls have that as well, and gender.
Thank you very much. Stories. Christine, I work with Tanzania International now. Many years I was in Indonesia, so just a point that I wanted to share, working with the indigenous women in Papua and in Borneo. And one striking thing is what the environment does in terms of supporting and giving precedence to the dignity of the women themselves. And when that environment upon which their livelihoods in different many ways, water and other things, it is destroyed, when you have food estates coming in and destroy your forest, drying up the rivers and the streams, there's also the dignity of that woman that is gone. So then this empowerment, I think, is an important connection. I'm sure it will come out in your report. If I may, I have a question, because also it struck me, I follow my organization and the Waiting for Biodiversity was the process of the resolution, so big success. But one thing always sort of bugs me is already 150 plus, I don't remember the exact number, countries recognize this right. And so what is that was not there and is there now to make that realization of that particular right? And how can we as organizations and movements and networks make sure it happens? Where is the energy, the value, the drive come from? Thanks.
Well, so really is if I understand the question correctly, it's about how can we use those resolutions? Is that right? Yeah. Right. Okay. So really it's, if I can paraphrase your question, what difference does the right to a healthy environment make? And so this was something that I've done a lot of research on, actually. And there's 156 countries in the world where the right to a healthy environment is incorporated in law. About 100 countries where it's recognized as a constitutional right, which is the highest and strongest form of rights in our legal system. About 100 countries where it's found in legislation, and over 130 countries that are parties to regional human rights treaties that include the right to health and water. So altogether, you have some overlap. There's 156 countries. It makes a difference. It makes a much bigger difference in some countries than others. In countries that have what we call strong rule of law. So that is, respect for democracy, relatively low levels of corruption, functioning government institutions, and independent judiciary. When those kind of groundwork conditions are met, then the legal recognition of the right to a healthy environment can and has made a difference. So, for example, I studied 92 countries, this was a decade ago, I studied 92 countries that had constitutional recognition of the right to a healthy environment. And compared to countries that didn't have constitutional right to a healthy environment, those countries reduced emissions of air pollution faster, they reduced greenhouse gas emissions faster, they were more likely to have ratified international environmental agreements, and they had smaller ecological footprints. So and I'm a lawyer, not an economist, so I did just a simple correlation was my study, but it's been followed up by economists who've done, sophisticated statistical analysis and reached the conclusion that there's a causal relationship between the recognition of the right to a healthy environment and superior environmental performance. Now, where has it not made a difference? It has sadly not made a difference in countries where the rule of law is weak. But it's by no means alone amongst human rights. In countries where the rule of law is weak, what some people call failed states, for example, no human rights are being respected. And so, we have a lot of work to do to raise up those states to help them get their feet on the ground, and then we can move this. But it's really critically important to recognize this right has been making a difference for decades around the world. I've been involved in over a dozen lawsuits around the world based on the right to a healthy environment. I mentioned one in South Africa, a similar air pollution case in Indonesia that was successful, a climate case in Brazil that was successful. There's 3 climate change and human rights cases currently before the European Court of Human Rights that I'm involved in. One of which, my favorite case, actually is brought by a group of Swiss women, senior Swiss women, whose argument is that the climate crisis is increasing the frequency and severity of heat waves, and that heat waves disproportionately affect older women, and they have excellent scientific evidence that this is the case. And so they tried this case through the Swiss court system, and a bunch of male judges threw out the case saying, well, you're saying Switzerland hasn't fulfilled its human rights obligations. We won't really know that until 2030 to see whether they've met their 2030 targets, which is a totally ridiculous response from the highest court in Switzerland. So the senior Swiss women have brought their case to the European Court of Human Rights. It's been fast-tracked to the Grand Chamber, which is the highest level of the European Court of Human Rights. And with several of my colleagues who are also special rapporteurs, we filed what's called an amicus brief in support of those Swiss senior women. We're hoping that we get a breakthrough decision in climate change and human rights from the European Court in 2023.
No, thank you so much. Any second questions you have here? Who have? Okay, let's give to somebody who hadn't spoken before. You and Megan.
Thank you so much for your work. In 2007, when I was pregnant with my third child, I was terrified. I knew she was going to be female, and she's not white either. My husband's not white, and I was just mortally terrified. And I changed my whole life because of it. Fast forward, she ultimately became a climate activist, and that's the good part of the story. When you talked about regression of climate policies, my government in Ontario regressed on climate policy, and right here in the room are some heroes and friends of mine. Eco-justice. My daughter is Sophia Mathur, and Mathur now is the case that is in front of the Ontario court. So I'm going to thank every person in this room who has fought for human rights and fought for women's rights and fought for the climate, fought for biodiversity. You are heroes, and you are independent.
Yeah, and I don't want this to be like a downing question because I think that human rights are an incredibly powerful tool. But recently I've been exploring the limitation of human rights in accounting and providing for like the change in how we relate to the natural world and how we relate to one another, and how human rights can convey this idea of entitlement and have limitations in really creating an understanding that we're all in relationship to one another and there has to be a give and take. And I think that a lot of indigenous conceptions of justice and of law do account for more of an understanding of justice that's based in responsibilities and reciprocity, as you alluded to. So I'm just wondering if that's something that you're considering in your work, and how, like, on at least maybe on the international scale, human rights and rights-based approaches can be expanded to incorporate nuances that understand that if we all see ourselves as entitled to unlimited environmental gifts and benefits, we won't actually address the root causes of the biodiversity and climate crises, as well as the various forms of discrimination and inequality that exist.
So, first, I just wanted to say thank you for raising such an amazing young person. And I think I have had the incredible privilege of working with young people. I have to say it's both the most inspiring part of my work as Special Rapporteur, and just thinking about it, I'm sorry, because I have a 16-year-old daughter who's a climate activist. I mean, it's extraordinarily difficult to be a young person today feeling if you have your eyes open to what's going on. Thank you. But young people are truly incredible, and so I've been fortunate to be part of something called the Children's Environmental Rights Initiative. And this is a global organization that is advancing children's right to a healthy environment. It's just an incredible group of young people. They were instrumental in securing the UN resolutions on the right to a healthy environment. I also work with 4 young women who are just unbelievable climate change activists. And they came to me about a year ago and said, you know, it's really encouraging that more young people are showing up at these types of meetings, like this biodiversity COP, the climate conference of the parties, but we're still kind of on the outside looking in, and we need to get inside the room where the decisions are being made. And their idea was to run a series of trainings for youth climate negotiators. And not only that, but to embed those young people on the actual national delegations. So a year ago, they said, would you be a part of our Council of Wisdom, which my daughter laughed at, said, you're not giving wisdom to them, they're giving it to me. But here, I said yes. And at this recent COP in Sharm el Sheikh, they trained 60 young people and embedded 55 of those young people on national delegations. Like, this is a group of 4 young women who just did this as a project. So that just shows the incredible creativity and power of youth, and in particular girls. And your question's not really a downer about this question. I mean, there's definitely a lively academic debate about our human rights and anthropocentric approach. Should we be taking a more ecocentric approach? I've followed those debates for decades, wearing my academic hat. But what's really encouraging to me is that we're starting to see increased interpretation of the human right to a healthy environment through what I would view as an ecocentric lens. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. In 2017, the Inter-American Court on Human Rights was asked to give an advisory opinion on human rights and the environment. It's an incredibly powerful advisory opinion that says the human right to a healthy environment is different from every other human right because it includes the health and well-being of humans, but also the health and well-being of nature. And so it really opened the door to kind of a unified interpretation of the right to a healthy environment and the rights of nature, reflecting the fact that we're part of nature. We're not like a separate entity out there operating somehow disconnected. And that judgment, that advisory opinion has been followed by courts in Colombia, in Mexico, in Costa Rica, in Panama. And so we're seeing this. And so I try and use that when I talk about the right to a healthy environment. I include healthy ecosystems and biodiversity, not only because they're beneficial to humans, but because their health is critical to the continued well-being of life on the planet. So I hope that turns into something that's hopeful. That's not to say that that's the interpretation that's recognized everywhere on Earth, but I do a lot of judicial education as well in my role, and I'm always trying to work with judges, and we're seeing every time I go to a meeting, I'm amazed. Judges are very receptive to these ideas, and I think that we're at a turning point where people can no longer kind of perpetuate that myth of humans being separate from and superior to nature.
Thank you, David, for that. Celia, you? Anybody else from would like to have a? All right. Okay. So we.
Hi, thank you. I just only wanted to add, like, certain question. Like, maybe the right to a healthy environment is also like a tool, like, for advocate for the environment. I mean, like, of course, if it is also a failed state, it will be a tool for indigenous communities, for youth, for people to have a more practical tool to ask the governments to fulfill national, regional, and international obligations. So, I mean, like, it's not only like the practical approach that it could have, but it's also the meaning and the message that is like trying to be enforced. Like, we are being aware of what is happening, and we are asking for solutions, and we are asking for answers as you, as communities. So I think that that's also like another effect or consequence of the right to a healthy environment. I just really wanted that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Whenever I listen to you, I'm always excited because something comes up and new, and it's exciting. And in this conversation, my question is more of a challenge to everyone to ask where did we go wrong? Because for the jurisprudence, in legal jurisprudence, there was this concept of natural law, and then the natural law school of thought, and then there was social article, etc. Now, going back to the natural one, where man used to live in harmony with nature, basically, and then the political institutions came up. And then the people coalesced around so-called rulers, and they separated their powers. So what we are doing now is basically retracing our steps. So there is a legal basis for living in harmony with nature. And it seems like we need to go back in history, because even the indigenous peoples, and I have also published a few articles with some of them,
have said that there was indigenous natural law. That was the law then. And now we have stratified and changed things, and here we are. We need to go and look at the place where we started. Thank you.
And since we're in Canada, I'll give a plug for a friend of mine's book, which is called Canada's Indigenous Constitution by an Anishinaabe scholar by the name of John Borrows. And he talks about the way that many Indigenous legal systems in Canada have this notion of a reciprocal relationship with nature in which nature has rights and humans have responsibilities. And I think it's really important. It's an
To tell our students, we are here to also communicate the message of success stories on the ground. Yes, we understand it might be the challenges, but we should also look at where we are going gains and capitalize on these gains and see how we scale up. And so I am going to give David the mic. After telling him that we'll be here just like this, to have the conversation about the right to a healthy and sustainable environment, and we want to know how we can promote this and how we can improve and how we see it affected in the TPN and how we can actually move forward with the right to a healthy environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be back here at the Women's Hub for another session today. We had a terrific conversation yesterday, and I want to just pick up where that left off. Maybe I'll just say a little bit about what the United Nations Special Rapporteur is for those people who may be not familiar with the UN system. So the United Nations Human Rights Council appoints experts in a variety of fields. So there's a special rapporteur on the rights of indigenous people, there's a special rapporteur on the rights to water and sanitation, special rapporteur on the right to health. I was appointed in 2018 as the second special rapporteur on the relationship between human rights and the environment. And so this is my 5th year in that role. It's a volunteer position. So like many of you, I'm a volunteer. I expect many of you are volunteers also. And part of my job is to do reports to the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly about issues related to human rights and the environment. So I've done reports on air pollution, on water, on biodiversity, on climate change, on toxic substances, and on food systems. And my next report to the Human Rights Council is what I'm really excited about. It's about women, girls, and the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And obviously I'm sitting here as a man, but I really been on a journey of learning about this. I have a 16-year-old daughter who's a climate activist, and so she's really been pushing me to focus on this topic. And I think that, as you all know much better than I will ever know, we live in a world where there is still persistent, systemic discrimination on the basis of sex and gender, as well as race, and other types of discrimination. But as my former colleague, the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, said, how are we ever going to solve the world's triple planetary crisis when we don't listen to the voices and engage the ideas of half of the human population, right, the women and girls? And so I'm really excited to be working on this report. I will definitely address the many challenges that living girls face in terms of those enjoying their right to the environment. But I also want to talk about ways that we can empower women and girls to have their voices heard, to participate in decision making, to have access to justice where your rights are being threatened or violated. And we have a tremendous amount of work to do. And I really believe that it's critical to our ability to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and that we dramatically increase the role of women and girls in solving these problems. There's some really devastating statistics in my report, which are probably already aware of, like only 1 in 4 elected parliamentarians are women. Only 1 in 6 ministers are women. Only 1 in 12 CEOs of large corporations are women. And according to UN Women, to close the transform all of the laws that today discriminate on the basis of gender, at the current rate we're changing those laws, will take 286 years. And according to the World Bank, to close the economic gap between men and women, at our current rate of progress, will take 155 years. So obviously we have to accelerate the rate of change. I think that human rights are one of the most powerful ways we can do that. And I think that the recent recognition by the United Nations of the fact that everyone has the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment can be used as a catalyst for accelerating those changes that we really need. And so I'm excited to be here to listen to your stories, to answer your questions, and to support the work that you're doing to the extent that I can use my position at the UN to do that. That's really a terrific opportunity and an honor for me to do so. So I'm going to turn it back over to you to hear your voices.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a that I'm here to join us in the one who supports us a lot. And yeah, so we had from the rapporteur, and so what did I do today? That this is the rapporteur week report. It's a project that is very candid and open and funny and appreciative. Now, over to the good time to hear the students. And also, as you make your presentation, identify this. If it's from an indigenous so that we understand the details of your student, what they did. And just one of the study mentioned that he's finalizing a report. Perhaps the house educated us what's exactly go into this and what's also you can feel for each and that report on your success stories. Yeah, I have more
The report to the Human Rights Council is about women, girls, and gender diverse people and their right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Unfortunately, also, back a few months ago, I put out a call for inputs. I've received over 50 inputs including from Women for Biodiversity and many different organizations and states. The report has to be finished next Monday, unfortunately, but there will also be a separate annex of good practices. So with all of my reports to the UN, I also try and highlight the amazing work that's being done around the world by different groups and different communities. And so that annex of good practices doesn't have to be done until January. So if you have stories you can share with me, I will put them in my good practices annex and share those stories with the United Nations. So I'd really love to now turn the floor over to you and hear your stories.
Thank you very much. You have heard it. There's an opportunity, so let's get on to the opportunity. And a great woman, I tell you.
Skyway, Anise, Zakose. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, my name is Marlene Hale, and I am from the Wet'suwet'en Nation, which is in northern British Columbia. And my people of the Wet'suwet'en, since January the 8th of 2019, were inflicted with an injunction to put a pipeline through our territory of 22,000 square kilometers of land. And when we talk about women, and what has transpired ever since then in Canada, the Wet'suwet'en Nation has hit the world over in recognition of what has transpired on our territory. And we have been fighting profusely all through the UN, through Geneva, on the atrocities that are happening to our people to get this pipeline through. I spent the last 6 months since of April of last year in British Columbia. I live in Montreal, and I've spent 6 months touring BC of all of the, documenting things that have happened with other nations compared to my nation. and other things that are happening where it is women on the front lines, matriarchs fighting for their territory, matriarchs who are chiefs, they hold a chief's name. And on January the same, going to 2020, first of all, when the police went into our territory, January the 14th of that year, it took 120 RCMP to go in on our territory and only arrest 14 people that were brutally arrested. And it was shown all over the world what has transpired. When it went in a year later, they had to go into two different territories. The first one is called Gidimda. Molly Wickham stood strong, a woman on the front lines, hunted for 120 police to arrest her. She held a feather, which means for us, it signifies we are peaceful people. When they had tactical guns, we hold only a feather. A year later, they had to go into Unistoten, which is another camp up there. On the day they did this, the women were in ceremony. They were in ceremony for the missing and murdered indigenous women of our territory. And they had red dresses behind them, all of the trees that were signifying that if we wanted to bring our women home who were missing, we wanted to bring their spirits home. That day when the RCMP came in again, over 200 just to arrest 5 women, 200 vehicles, a helicopter, and everything else, and tactical guns. And we all know that when we hold our drums, it is our sacredness to us.
Yeah.
Our clothes that we wear, our regalia, we identify us of the territories that we are with. And the RCMP have to discuss amongst themselves who is going to go get Frida Houston's drum from her. And they said, no, you go get it. I'm not going to touch her because she was a chief. She held the chief's name. No, you go get her. I'm not going to touch her. There's no way. They spoke amongst themselves. And no, finally he decided there he is going to go take the drum from her. He held the drum, and it was that image with him and another RCMP who stood with a big smile in front of a red dress, which is sacrilegious to us. And after that, that is what shut Canada down. What shut Canada down meant millions of people all around the world stood behind our nation of what was the atrocities, the genocide that was happening to us in so-called Canada here. After that, what finalized everything was when they saw the image of an RCMP in front of a red dress with a big smile on his face, and the drum was thrown into the snow. That was hurtful to see. So millions of people took the streets of Canada, and it cost Canada billions of dollars. We shut down the railway. We shut down many things in significance of roads, highways, and airplanes, everything else to get the message through that you cannot do this to the Wet'suwet'en nation of people. Ever since then, it has been the biggest fight of our lives. Recently, the UN has discovered a letter from the RCMP, way after this first started, that from the RCMP, they uncovered a letter that had said to the RCMP that were going into our territory that they could shoot us if they had to. In so-called Canada, this is unpardonable in a court of law. And it is the human rights that we have been fighting for in our territory. I have been with the Special Rapporteurs and writing many letters to Geneva, Switzerland, speaking to them on the atrocities that the RCMP are dealing with now in Canada towards the Indigenous people. I'm also working, I've been working profusely with systemic racism and making a film all across Canada because of what that has transpired into systemic racism to us people of Indigenous lands. In our own home town of Smithers, British Columbia, it's a beautiful little town. And my family are feeling terrific because they are prisoners in their own home. What the coastal gas link has inflicted up there is to try to get our people the biggest division ever. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to take you a drive in an $80,000 truck, and I'm going to show you the lifestyle you could have if you sign over to the Coastal GasLink, is what they're doing to our people. And so I'm on the other side, and so the ones that are not signing are getting the worst treatment in our own hometown. We cannot hire a helicopter. We cannot put an ad in the paper because the paper is owned by white supremacists. We cannot go into a dentist. The dentist will not touch us. That is systemic racism. We go into a store to buy groceries, feed our families, and we're told by people to go back where we came from. They have no idea that's where we came from. That was our home. And still, it is just, the treatment is what it is today. I'm a chef by trade. I have taught over 10,000 children all over Canada. My teachings is culture, cuisine, cooking, through food, the language, absolutely everything. I talk about my story all across Canada, around the world. I went to Panama City and spoke to 23 countries of the Latin Americas on the situation women on the front lines are dealing with. These women were at the front lines, so there's Molly Wickham, a chief, women who stood by her, an elder who stood by her, all women. The other camp was Frida Houston. She's a chief. Her doctor, her niece is a doctor. They built a healing center up there. They spent millions of dollars. They've been working and using on our territory with a pipeline. The government of Canada has not only just put one pipeline, they have okayed 4. And my story to biodiversity of COP15 was to stop this pipeline because they want to put it under this river. Our pristine river, what we call the Witzenquam. And it is the salmon, the habitat. We have moose, we have wolves up there. We have everything that thrives on salmon. And they want to destroy that. My last battle last week was dealing with land assessment because they have given the Coastal GasLink only a fine of $250,000 because they put sediment in this river. A $67 billion corporation gets only a slap on the face, on the hand, for doing what they are doing to our environment. We have had human rights after human rights taken away from us as women. One sits now for 5 years, and it's getting worse. We have, through the pandemic, I have had to go home to less 45 in my nation from the pandemic because it was hard on our elders, hard on the women to deal with what was happening out there, the division amongst our people. And only the last 5 days, we are trying also very hard to fix ourselves through ceremony, through the elders, through the eldership elderly, and through the biggest court case that we have had, which is it's called the the Stay Away court case. It's a famous court case in our land, which happened 25 years ago. My mother, chief's name was Guhead, and she was the witness at this famous court case that gave us the indigenous land rights. And we have UNDRIP. We have trying to have the MOA, which is the Memorandum of Understanding between the government of Canada and our indigenous people. And it was still, no matter what we have to show you, you are still taking away our land, our rights as humans, and place genocide upon us. And you're still digging in more, but we are battling back. We still have the feathers in our hand, not tactical guns. We still have our voices, and we are still women. We're still mothers. We're still chiefs, and we are still here. And we will not give up the fight. I won't. I am turned from a chef to an activist to one of the biggest ones in Canada to the fight for the life of my people. And also, it is not just our nation, it's for the youth of today that I worked for in all of this pandemic, finishing the pandemic. The children of Montreal, especially the students, went under the biggest uprise of January the 14th when the Greta Thunberg was here speaking about climate crisis, and this is where I helped the youth. I helped them through so many things, and right now with climate trauma. I went to Vancouver, British Columbia, and I met with 20 young children. The one who gave me the first interview was 21 years old. She was on a ferry going from Victoria to Vancouver, BC. She was yelling at everybody on the ferry that nobody cared for her, nobody cared about the climate, nobody cared about the future, and she wanted to jump off and kill herself. They talked her out of it. They held her in a room by the police. She was in the hospital for a month. So like 20 other children, she has to have her medication by court order. That's the only way they fix these children. It is not right. There were so many stories that I listened to, all of them. Some of the stories were horrific, where kids spoke and said, my parents don't listen to me like you do. My parents don't understand. They say to me, why are you doing what you're doing? Let it go. Let other people take care of it. And the kids say no. And they gravitate towards me. They know the story that I have with with my nation, my people. And as a Wet'suwet'en, I'm a strong person. I do a lot of training on self-care. When I'm talking, before I do, I always go like this. I don't let anything in. Nothing is going to get here. Nothing is going to hurt me. I have to train myself to mindful and not medication, and just talking to myself a lot, and doing meditation every morning before I do what I'm doing. Doing self-care, teaching other people to take care of yourself, because if you're not healthy yourself, you're not going to be healthy for your nation, your people, and your families. If you're not healthy, nobody's going to hear from you from a bed in the hospital. You have to be very careful and how you pick and choose your words, how you talk to people. Don't hurt the one next to you. Be very respectful. The way we tried to get the government to show us the one word. In Wet'suwet'en, it's wagus. Wagus means respect. And as a woman, as a nation, that's all I ask for, is respect. And what I give when I come in here. COP15 is something I am really appreciating, in a sense where I'm really happy to have met people who are there to give us a hand. Women, to give us a voice, an international voice. I'm very happy that we have other women who've been there before, and they know what it is like through the process of the international voice. I have been to speak to 23 countries in Panama City, all women in the front lines. I met a woman here from Brazil 2 years before. I was hoping to meet her as an activist again when I got to Panama City. When I got there, they asked the organizers of MAR. I showed the picture of her on my camera, and I said, I'm anxious to see her again. And they held it away from me for a few days, and after a few days, I went back to them and I said, where is she? I don't see her with the Brazilian people. And they finally took me aside and they said, I'm so sorry. She was pushed off her roof. As an activist, she's no longer with us. And it was saddened. So I brought my drum to Panama City, and I asked if we could go in a circle and we could have a prayer for her as a woman, to mention the work that she has done, that we will carry on the work she was doing. We will be there with our voices to carry on the work and the words that she wanted to say and put out to the world, just as a woman. Another woman from Colombia that I met, she came all the way here to Montreal, and we made sure that she had the right connections to have her story put out. And we connect still today. And I have a webinar that I do every Friday It's now become a worldwide webinar of women and everybody else getting their stories that's worldwide. We would love to invite all of you, any one of you, to come on it. And my webinar is Marlene, Solidarity Webinars Action Group. And when I see you after, you can write it down. I would love to connect with all of you and having your stories spread out that way as well. We need to all stand together united. We are sisters. Sisterhood is strong, like our mothers. Motherhood is strong. And sisterhood is there. We're always here. Our ancestors say, we're the soul of your spine. The ancestors have our back. The ancestors are watching us right now. And the ancestors are worried about us. They're worried about us on Earth here. It's not a good time for us. So this is the time we appreciate ourselves, the connecting with Mother Earth. And when we do that, we also connect with our ancestors all the time. And we give blessings for that in our nation. And we give medicines, and we drum, and we chant their songs that they taught us over 50 years ago. The celebrations of the landmarks of decisions of the Supreme Court, we celebrate that as well. All the small things that we have to cling on to is hope. Masai, thank you for listening.
I just want to say from my heart, Marlene, thank you. Much bagus, much respect. This is a story that really illustrates many of the themes we're here to talk about. Systemic racism, systemic discrimination against women and girls, and yet the extraordinary power and courage of these people. And I think that in a situation like what's Overton facing British Columbia here in Canada today, people are being treated as criminals. People are being called terrorists by the government. Well, what I call your people are heroes for the planet, environmental human rights defenders. And I think that it's really, what you said about sisterhood is really important. And one of my questions to you is, how can we actually get the brothers on board as well? Because I think that the sisterhood is doing amazing work, but needs allies. And so one of my goals here is to be the best ally I can be for women and girls. But I look out at the audience here, it's all women activists. So we need to get the brothers on board as well. And so I welcome anybody's suggestions on how we can do that.
Thank you very much, Rapporteur, and also thank you very much, strong indigenous discovered, right? I do hear you in the sense of, from a women's perspective, we take care of children, their boys and girls, we have husbands, we have brothers. And this is a struggle not only for ourselves, it's for everyone in our society. Because even when we advance the gender aspects and the gender agenda, we are not talking about ourselves only. So that is a classic case of how our issues are intertwined with everyone in our society and every aspect of our environment and life. And so, thank you very much. Now, I want to hear also from another person. So identify yourself also, and if you have indigenous connection, please also tell us. Yeah, and give us hope, success stories as we also present.
Thank you so much. No Kelly from DRC. My name is you can have a someone who is going to make the translation so that I can well express my experience and my idea. Because I was just sitting the way. La potrei far cadere l'esperienza della Repubblica Democratica del Congo. Je voudrais partager l'expérience de la République démocratique du Congo. You would like to share with you the experience of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Oui, nous sommes les peuples autochtones. La première chose que nous avons, nous sommes les premiers occupants du territoire national. We're indigenous people and therefore we're the first dwellers on the national territory. Si on nous pose la question comme on en a l'habitude, Au moyen de quelle province, si tu es nous disons, nous sommes autochtones, native land, les propriétaires de ces terres.
And if people ask us where we come from, we tell them that we are from the native land. We are indigenous. We are the owners of this land.
La première chose que nous avions essayé dans les organisations de la société, c'est faire la cartographie des peuples autochtones. Là où nous trouvons dans chaque région, dans chaque province, dans chaque milieu.
The first thing we're trying to do is map the indigenous peoples of Congo and show where is it that they position on the territory.
Me donner les mails, je vais vous envoyer ça par mail.
If you're interested in, you give her your email, she will send that to you by mail.
Et dans tout cela, nous avons répertorié là où ils sont, mais nous avons un problème. Nous ne connaissons pas les noms. Nous sommes combien de femmes, nous sommes combien d'hommes, nous sommes combien de jeunes, nous sommes combien de vieilles personnes. Et que dans les projets, on peut avoir des indicateurs, des personnes pour les questions de grade.
In order to work on blights, we have a little problem. The problem is that we don't know the number of people, young people, women, old people. We don't know, so it's very difficult to work on blights in these conditions.
Et maintenant, les projets de dénombrement de la population, parce que le recensement est trop grand pour toute la République démocratique. Il y a un projet où on peut compter les autochtones, les dénombrer avec les Nations Unies pour la population, associés vraiment pour nous avec l'Institut des statistiques et le ministère des Finances. Ça sera une bonne chose. Je peux vous dire que nous sommes autant de là même au niveau de la République démocratique.
What we would really like to be doing is to have a partnership with the UN in order for the UN to work with the government of Congo so that we have an idea in terms of statistic of who is where and how many, so that we can actually have a view and work with the population.
Et sont depuis le temps, la discrimination et la marginalisation à cause des normes coutumières innovables.
From forever, we have been going on the great threat and the power of discrimination from forever.
Les femmes autochtones, lorsque le sida est arrivé, lorsque certains les épidémies sont arrivées, les hommes déclarent, il faut guérir les maux de dos, pour guérir tout ce que j'ai, je dois vivre avec une femme autochtone. Et ça devient péjoratif.
We've gone under a lot of discrimination. One of them at the time of AIDS was that many days where they were saying that in order to cure myself, I need to have sex with indigenous woman.
Et il y avait une séparation totale. Maintenant, il y a l'éveil de la conscience. Il y a la discrimination et la marginalisation.
There is now an awareness raising for the need to break the marginalization as well as the discrimination.
Nous avons monté des réseaux, des networks, des organisations autochtones, des NGO, et puis les groupes de pression comme les leaders locaux autochtones et pour adresser ce phénomène.
So we have created networks where the leaders of the indigenous people can actually come and join and fight this discrimination.
Et maintenant défendre nos droits. Parce que là où il y a nos terres, c'est là où il y a les mines et les hydrocarbures.
And now there is the problem of rights, land rights, because where our lands are is where the mines are, is where they want to mine.
Les forêts denses, les espèces forestières, c'est là où se trouvent les autochtones, mais il n'y a pas tellement de la biodiversité. Comme les papis, ce sont les autochtones qui lui donnent à manger. À l'époque, ce sont les autochtones qui sont là pour sauvegarder les écologistes.
Also, wherever there is dense forests with so much biodiversity resources, that's where the indigenous peoples are, where the Kapi are, how to feed them, everything is on the responsibility of indigenous peoples.
Et puisque nous connaissons les problèmes des landes urbaines, l'expropriation des terres par les lobbies privés qui viennent exploiter les forêts, par l'État congolais pour des utilités vides, par des activistes qui viennent des autres pays là où il y a du Sahel, ils n'ont pas d'eau, il n'y a pas de forêt, qui maintenant envahissent des terres autochtones, il n'y a pas que nous n'avons pas d'arbres. Nous sommes une voix sans voix.
We are facing people who want to throw us out of our territories, the lobbies, the government, and private sector, and also countries where they had over water. So we don't have guns, we're just there. And we are being deprived of our land rights.
Et nous sommes adressés au gouvernement congolais qui dit non, le gouvernement protège tout le monde. Et la Constitution, dans l'article 14, dit que les citoyens congolais sont devant la loi.
And when we go to the government and tell them about what's happening, they say, no, in our constitution, in the law number 14, it says that anybody is equal in front of the law.
Dans cette date-là, il y a des domaines spécifiques.
No. In this kind of equality, there are some specific rules.
Mais en ce qui concerne les gender equality, nous sommes tous des femmes congolaises, mais il y a la loi sur la parité, la loi de 2015, et nous n'avons pas les mêmes forces. La femme en tout est en avant, et nous sommes à quelques mètres de la course, et il y a prédalité même entre les femmes.
Even in terms of women, the indigenous women always have to be are put into a few steps behind the rights of the other men.
Et même dans les de la famille élevée, on ne respecte pas les chiffres, n'est-ce pas? Nous, les femmes autochtones, on vient nous contacter de loin. Chérie, la note, et que ça arrive avec nous. Parce que moi, je peux courir avec une femme technique, avec une femme autochtone.
So in terms of parity, there is this issue. But then there is also the issue that at night they look for 50 women. Give me women. She said, give me women. She said, am I beautiful? I said to her, yeah, you're beautiful. So she sought after in the night, but in the day, she's kept away and nobody knows her.
Quand il y a des enfants qui sont nés dans ce genre de contact, les pères, la paternité est prise et les enfants sont réunis, ils n'ont pas d'acte de naissance, l'enfant ne peut pas aller étudier parce qu'il n'a pas un père qui peut lui envoyer aux études et la maman n'a rien.
In terms of the product of these relationships, children, they never are recognized by the father. So in terms of education, these children are completely depleted because they can't go and educate because they don't have a mind of it. They're not recognized, they're not declared by the maids that were actually the fathers. And the mothers, they get nothing.
Et si cette convention est signée aujourd'hui, on dit 30 fois 30, il faut tuer les droits aux peuples autochtones. Si on dit les enfants peuvent aller dans l'école, ils n'ont pas de naissance. Ils ne connaissent pas les dates de naissance. Ils restent dans les forêts. Mais la santé maternelle de la maman aujourd'hui avec la cellulose est importante.
So even if we get the 30 by 13, even if we get authority and give authority and power to the indigenous peoples, all these children, they are not officially born. They didn't get an act of birth. So they're not recognized. And even the women, what kind of maternal health do they get in the forests?
Et puis ça, nous avons avec les fonds des Nations Unies, sensibiliser l'État congolais et toutes les parties prenantes qui aussi se veiller à la santé maternelle de l'enfant, des mamans, et que les enfants aient des actes. Il nous faut des projets comme ça, une sensibilisation des parties prenantes.
Therefore, we have projects where we are trying to do the connections with UN and UN, the different human bodies in order for these children to get the act, but in order for sensitization of this problem and for the women to get maternal care.
En ce qui concerne les ressources naturelles et la gouvernance des ressources naturelles, la gouvernance des terres, la gouvernance des forêts et de l'eau, nous ne participons pas dans la prise de décision parce que ceux qui prennent les décisions dans un haut niveau ne peuvent pas étudier.
And in terms of governance, water governance, land governance, etc., we can't be part of the decisions because none of us have been able to study.
Même dans les causes sociales de les charges de l'exploitation de la biodiversité, parce que j'ai participé dans cet event où on lit le partage des bénéfices, des ressources qu'on doit adopter ici dans la Convention. Comment nous allons partager alors que nos lois ne sont pas respectées, alors que nous sommes forts, nous sommes faibles par rapport aux autres parties prenantes?
And even when there is talks about benefit sharing, how are we going to be able to get some of these shares? Because we are not recognized, we are weak, we are considered.
Et avec ça, nous avons quand même poussé certaines choses. Parce que quand on est venu pour nous déposséder de nos terres, un jour nous avons révolté les gens pour leur dire, toi, l'État congolais, qui est ton père, qui est ta mère? Et nous puissions quitter ces terres parce que tu dis dans la loi que les sols et les sous-sols appartiennent à l'État congolais. Qui est ton père, qui est ta mère?
When they wanted to dispossess us from our territories, the Congolese government, we threatened, we didn't threaten them, we kind of went up to them and we told them, who's your mother? Who is your father? Who does this land actually belong to?
C'est ce qui nous a poussé à aller à la réforme. Nous avons travaillé tellement fort pour faire la typologie des terres. Les terres autochtones, les villages mixtes et les villages qui sont maintenant propres aux autochtones et nous avons intégré ça dans la loi. L'avant-projet de la loi est là, nous avons gagné.
This is how they went to recognition of territories, the recognition of the villages that are purely indigenous, the villages that are mixed, indigenous and other descendants, not descendants, but not descendants, I don't know what to say that. Yeah. And they worked really, really hard and they got recognized in their rights through this work.
Et il y a aussi d'autres réformes sectorielles de l'aménagement du territoire, de la politique forestière nous avons dit, nous devons aussi être partie prenante.
And we have also gone to the forestry government, and when they were actually studying, dividing, working on forests, we asked them to be part of the negotiations.
Et un peu monopolisé la parole. Nous avons, depuis 2012, maintenant, nous avons travaillé une loi nous-mêmes. Nous avons contacté l'Assemblée nationale pour qu'ils nous donnent des députés qui peuvent nous soutenir.
And since 2012, we have been working with the local government in order to get deputies elected that would actually give us their support.
Et nous avons maintenant, nous sommes partis dans toute la République, là où se trouvent les autochtones pour les sensibiliser, que nous puissions avoir une importante émotion et protection des peuples autochtones en République.
And we were all the different villages of indigenous peoples to sensitize them about the need to have protection and promotion of the indigenous struggles of the people, so that they can be recognized and supported by the government.
La proposition de la loi a été réfléchie plusieurs fois. Qui sont autochtones de ces pays où nous sommes les 7 nations.
And we really promoted the fact of getting the right laws, because there are many nations in our territory. So we did a lot of work in order for the recognition to happen.
Et la loi est là, elle a été signée. C'est dans cette loi où nous sommes en train de grandir. C'est l'arme de combat et de libération.
So this is the war. This is the story, and this is our daughter, to be able to claim our rights of protection and promotion.
Elle vient d'être signée il y a 3 semaines seulement quand on était à Montreal.
I know. But you'll be trying to write them. I mean, should it's the third part, even on God, so you probably change it. But we did a lot of work and a lot of working to that end.
J'ai fait en sorte de vous envoyer ça.
Sure. I will say that too.
Okay. J'ai traduit cette loi dans les 4 langues nationales pour qu'on puisse sensibiliser maintenant les autochtones à s'en approprier. Et c'est notre outil.
And I have been translating this text of the 4 indigenous languages that are there in Congo, so that any and all indigenous peoples can actually make it their tour in order to get their rights.
Ma sœur, la Kenyane qui est là, elle peut avoir la version en Swahili. Parce que dans le mot Swahili bon. Et puis, Sheria, il faut le Swahili. Parce que j'ai traduit ça aussi en Swahili. Les Kenyans, les Tanzaniens, les Ougandais peuvent comprendre cette loi en Swahili. Voilà. Et elle peut avoir une version Swahili.
Even a sister here who's from Kenya, she could get a version of this law because she translated it already into Kenyan. She can use the language to understand in Kenya and Tanzania. So this can be yours as.
Là.
There is the law.
Et il y a des applications sur terrain, ça doit loin d'être appliqué sur terrain.
Then we need to apply the law on the land, on the field.
Et dès lors, il faut que nous puissions la vulgariser et avoir des mesures d'application sur le terrain. Il ne soit pas bavoué, parce que tout ce que nous cherchons est dans les contenus de cette loi.
So I'm requesting for the purpose for this law not to be to me, but to be right, and everything is actually written there, but now it has to be used.
Merci beaucoup d'avoir partagé toutes les choses dans les couloirs parce que l'autre fois, le fait de
Thanks. The rest we will share in the corridors because I really might want to share your experience.
Development is definitely a speed. And yeah, we have two very great women who have shared their experiences. I'm sure they have laid a basis for us to keep this conversation going. And I don't know, maybe before I continue, the rapporteur would like to say something.
Je voudrais dire merci beaucoup pour l'entretien de votre histoire et son travail très fort pendant des ans. Thank you very much for all of your powerful work and for the success you've achieved after all of that difficulty. I think these two stories that have been shared here today actually have some very common themes, right? They have the common theme of systemic racism, systemic gender-based discrimination, the importance of land to indigenous peoples, the power of women and girls standing up for their rights and standing up for the land, the power of women and girls as defenders of biological diversity. And I think that really is what we're here for this week in Montreal at COP15, to make sure that human rights are at the heart of the global biodiversity framework. The last time we did something like this, when the Aichi biodiversity targets were created in 2010, no mention of human rights at all. A terrible mistake that I believe is responsible for our failure to protect biodiversity or failure to advance human rights in the field of the biodiversity over the past 12 years. We have a chance to do things differently here. We have a chance to get it right, and we have to make sure that the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, the rights of indigenous people, gender equality, those have to be woven throughout the global biodiversity framework so that we can use human rights-based approaches to conservation, which are the most effective. The science is crystal clear. That is the most effective way to protect life on this planet, is to recognize the rights of indigenous peoples and other nature-dependent local communities that have stewardship responsibilities, customary laws, and traditional knowledge. It's the most efficient, effective, and equitable way to do it. And I don't think it's an option at this point. I think it's an obligation, given the human rights treaties that governments around the world have signed on ending all forms of discrimination against women, on ending all forms of racial discrimination, the international environmental agreements on biodiversity and climate change. It's no longer just, oh, well, you know, let's put human rights in the preamble. No, human rights have to be at the absolute heart of the global diversity framework. Why? Because the global economy is based on the exploitation of people and the exploitation of nature, and that system has to change. That's why the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says we need transformative change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, we need transformative change. And in this context, we need gender transformative change.
Thank you, Rapporteur. This is very inspiring. And we have been inspired to take action back at home, here at the COP, everywhere. And from our own experiences in Kenya, we have this Nobel laureate, Wangari Maathai. She died. The late Professor Wangari Maathai was also a gender activist. And like the rapporteur says, it's time for gender transformative actions. We need to get that happening right now. And I don't know whether, Tina, do you want to make an announcement?
No.
Okay. So I think we just take views of the ladies and the gentlemen. I would wish to hear a gentleman speak at this forum, because this is not only about us, this is about the men, our sons and daughters, and our husbands, and everybody across the globe, and their various roles in society.
Thanks, Cecilia. Thanks, David, as always, for taking the time. I just, yeah, on the closing, I just want to say that thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to share your experiences. But the work is going to start for all of us to take back home, and the responsibility that each one of us has, having the actual advantage and the opportunity to be here, right? We are coming here saying we represent voices and we represent our networks back home. So we need to be going back with the responsibility how we share information, how we provide access to the people, right? So I think this is one thing I really want to do, that is, see, coming to the club meeting is a very easy thing. We're very, how to say, privileged to come here and say these things and aspire for them. But as much as we hold parties accountable, we also need to hold ourselves accountable. What are we doing to make sure that these information, these decisions, these agendas are being reached to our networks at the national level, at the local level? How are we sharing information with them? And we need to decentralize our own positions, actually. We need to really ensure that we come here, we speak, we go back, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, let's wait for the next stop, right? What are our responsibilities when we go back is to make sure that whatever you are hearing, see how you place yourself within that discussion and making sure that you take these out into your communities, share with them, share the information, share these discussions, because what we talk about human rights out here, the realities are very different. People don't even know what human rights are, what their rights are. But we know it because we study it, we are working with organizations, we are doing research, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then either our capacities are like, we come with a COP and we do all these, we push for it, and we ourselves die out, right? I just want to have it that we've had so much of fire and so much of energy and in solidarity, to build the solidarity. So we're using the space for all of you to come, share, get to know each other, connect when you go back, get them connected to the other people they're looking for. We have a lot of knowledge among ourselves. We have a lot of information among ourselves. So let's share that. I think that's where it really begins from. If we really need to go to the path of inclusion, that's really very important. How do we include not only us, our information needs to be shared too. So with that, I'll say that we are starting off the Global Biodiversity Framework. Is going to hopefully be adopted because there is a lot of discussions around the contact groups. Parties are walking out of discussions if you're following. And the GBF is a very small part. Look into financial resource mobilization. How can you influence that process? Talk to your partners, reach out to them, and also ensure that you also mingle, get to know each other. And then we are here to build that collective solidarity, collective sisterhood, include, like I tell people, women's COP is somebody else to me, like, can I come? I'm from XYZ. And I'm like, yeah, why not? Because we are not saying, you all are part, we all wear different hats. We wear party hat, we wear UN agency hat, we wear the hat of a Gibbon, the youth, the indigenous women, other people who are here from maybe the business as well that are standing there. Like, and it's not saying that this is very exclusive, right? This is a thing of like sharing awareness, and we're all part of that. In our own spaces, we can make a difference. So thank you so much, David. Thank you so much. And also Celia for stepping in, because I was supposed to go to a contact group. We didn't have it because we had a walkout. So I'm back here again. So thank you so much to both of you.
Okay, thank you very much. Tina is the director of the Women for Biodiversity. She didn't tell us that, but he's Ovasio. This for the ones who don't know, and I am privileged to be part of the advisory team, and along with other friends, powerful women in this audience. So maybe what we could do is perhaps also as we discuss, we limit our time so that we give everyone a chance to speak. Maybe we can take 2 minutes
at least 3 minutes, but at the same time also pay attention to the success stories, the messages of what and how we've done it back at home, so that we can be able to learn from each other, and so that we can give our rapporteur something to write in the annex that he's writing until January. So time is of the essence. We have until January. All right. We have another. So, Sister, you're from Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to make a contribution. My name is Olamide Saidat Aljuma. I'm from Nigeria. When we look at history in the past, women have always been the one feeling the heat at home, in the community, and in the nation. And you have come to understand one thing, that we can fight the government. They always have a way to reinforce themselves against the woman. But the contribution I wanted to make is, let us all know as a woman that we are the one that is bettering life. And once we make our stand, I think we can do something about whatever is happening in our geographical area. And secondly is, I've seen, even from where I came from, if they really want to deal with you, they would withdraw information from you. Because if you don't have access to information, you will be deprived of so many things which you need to know. And the key aspect of living in this world is knowledge. Knowledge and information, they are so powerful for human existence. And the movement, they wanted to deform you, they deprive you of information, because it's through the information that you can be transformed. And without transformation, there is no how you can communicate whatever you are facing to the upcoming generation, because they've withdrawn certain forces, the power which you need to use in communicating to fellow human. We could see what is happening in Iran in time past, what they did to that lady. So they always have a way, and they always have a means of coming against us. And when you look at what happened in Nigeria in 2020 concerning the NSAS program, you could see the lady that championed this event. Our government, they seized all our accounts. They collected our international passports, and in so doing, they confiscated every means of a livelihood. So how can we go about that? Do we get it? How can we, as women, champion some things that are happening around us that we want to speak, and we're seeing that people were being killed right in front of us? So please, I don't know how the UN can always come to our aid. Special Rapporteur, I think that is directed to you.
Well, I'll be honest and say I don't have I don't think there's an easy answer to your question. It's a very difficult situation. I do want to agree with you 100% about the importance of education and information. And certainly in my report, I have clear recommendations to states about the fundamental importance of girls having access to education. It's one of the most important things we can do to empower girls to change the future trajectory of their lives. And we know that there's a lot of environmental factors and systemic gender discrimination that prevent girls from enjoying their fundamental human right to education. For example, in many countries throughout Africa, it is women and girls who have the responsibility to gather water for their families, to gather the fuel for the fires, to cook the food for their families. And this often interferes with their ability to get an education. Climate change is making that worse. Women and girls are having to travel further afield to find clean water, to find fuel for the cook fires. And so all of these issues are really interconnected, but at the very foundation, we know that education is a transformation in people's lives. And if we can get girls into school and get them graduating, it means they're going to be able to have their voices heard. It's going to mean that they can achieve the potential that they have as human beings. It's going to enable them to achieve the dignity that they have as human beings. And so all I can say is I agree with you 100% about the importance of education. Fulfilling girls' right to education has to be a priority. And also we have to, the second part of your comment, we also have to protect the people who are protecting nature. The UN calls environmental human rights defenders, what I just call heroes for the planet, what governments call criminals and terrorists. We have to protect those people. They're at the front lines of everything that we're trying to achieve in terms of justice, equality, and a sustainable future. So we have to prioritize their rights. And that should be, again, I keep coming back to this because we're at COP15. There should be specific provisions in COP15 that say states have to protect environmental human rights defenders. They have to. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Special Rapporteur. Okay, 2 minutes.
There, I can respond. I'd like to respond to your education question. If you look up online, and it's called 60 Million Girls, and it's based in Montreal here. And what 60 Million Girls does, they are working in Africa in one nation. And what they do is the girls are taught. It's all for places that don't have access to internet, and that would be yourself. And so what happens is I made a business plan on this, and I got 100% on it because that's the kind of a thing that I'm looking for in Canada North, where they're in the remote areas of Canada and they don't have access to education. And so I go to the community and I ask them, what would you like to learn? And so if it's from certain ages that you want them to learn first, on English, writing, and all of that. You put that on videos, and they are taught the old system on tablets. And so they learn at their own pace. And 60 Million Girls has been very successful at that, giving them the education that they are looking for. So make a research on it. And it is based in Montreal, and they have given me the permission to use their model. And they were hoping some indigenous person would use that as a model to help Canada, Canadian remote areas with their education. That would be very helpful for you.
Rapporteur, I have a question, my name. I was going to ask, because the injustice has already taken place across the globe, and there are people who have obviously been left behind. In addition to them making deliberate effort, like my sister here says, what else can be done to at least bring them to a level where they can be able to access the justice systems or speak out or even participate in the global framework of environment for implementation of various environmental actions? Because in law we speak a lot about affirmative action, a lot about marginalized communities and what we want to do to bring them to a place where they can at least participate. But what about, in this case, about the environment and natural resources? What do we do that?
Well, this is really at the heart of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, which is a human right that every single one of us possesses, because that right comes with a toolbox of participation rights. Access to information is a human right. Participation in decision-making is a human right. Access to justice with effective remedies is a human right. And one of the things that I'm really encouraged by is the incredible growth of organizations around the world that are, the purpose of these organizations is to provide legal assistance to vulnerable communities, to marginalized communities, to assert and to fulfill their human rights. And so, one of the real privileges of being a special rapporteur is being able to work with organizations like Natural Justice in Africa, which has tremendous expertise in terms of human rights and the environment. I was involved in a court case in South Africa where largely led by women from a poor community called Mpumalanga, got some assistance from the Center for Constitutional Rights, which is one of these organizations I'm talking about in Africa. And that organization was able to file a lawsuit saying that the South African government's failure to improve air quality in Mpumalanga violated their right to a healthy environment. That case was decided by a South African court last year, which ruled that the government of South Africa was violating the human right to a healthy environment of the people of Mpumalanga and ordered the government to take remedial action to respect the rights within a period of months. So that's one example from the air pollution context. In terms of climate change, we know that climate change is having really terrible impacts on people across the planet, but largely people in places that are not responsible for the crisis. And so human rights in the climate context are really important. And I'll give you one example of a case, again, that was just recently decided, where a group of indigenous people called the Torres Strait Islanders, who live on islands off the coast of Australia, they brought a case to the United Nations Human Rights Committee saying that the government of Australia had failed to respect their human rights by failing to take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and failing to take action to protect their community from the impacts of climate change. In the Torres Strait Islands, they're suffering from rising sea levels, saltwater contamination of their water supply, saltwater contamination of their soils that makes it impossible to grow food, and extreme weather events that wash waves right across their communities. And Australia has done virtually nothing to protect these indigenous people. So this is actually one of the first cases in the world where a court or a tribunal has found that a government is violating people's human rights by failing to take adaptation action to protect them from the impacts of climate change. So that's an encouraging example from the context of climate change. And then there's another case I want to talk about from Colombia, where a group of 25 children and teenagers, many of whom were young, many of whom were girls, brought a case against their own government, arguing that the government's failure to stop deforestation in the Colombian portion of the Amazon forest was a violation of their right to a healthy environment. That case went to the Supreme Court of Colombia, and the court found that the government had violated the young people's right to a healthy environment and had a constitutional obligation to come up with a plan to end deforestation by sitting down with the young people, getting their ideas, sitting down with the leading forest ecologists in Colombia, and putting together a plan to end deforestation. So that's just examples from across the world where these organizations, these lawyers who are, there's a lot of lawyers who are just in it for the money, but there's also a lot of lawyers who are in it to try and help people defend their human rights. And there are organizations like that, I think, definitely on every continent in most countries. And so I think I urge people to reach out and connect with those organizations. They're doing amazing work, and they are one potential resource. But of course, it's a bigger challenge than that. And so we really need to, as I spoke about earlier, I think that we need to change these systems so that women and girls have a voice, have a seat at the table, and are actually the ones making decisions. Because in the course of my research for this report on women, girls, and the right to a healthy environment, I've been so inspired by research led mostly by women that has clearly detailed what a difference it makes when women make the decisions. So when women are in charge of corporations, those corporations have a better record in terms of climate change and reducing emissions. When women are ministers in governments, those governments have a better record in terms of complying with international environmental agreements. When women are managing water, water gets used more efficiently. When women are managing forests, those forests are treated in a much more sustainable way. And there's just, I could go in my report, I could go on and on about these examples of how it makes a difference. Women who are in decision-making roles, much more so than men, put public interests ahead of private interests. And that's fundamentally what we need in the world in the year 2023. We need to stop putting the private interests of corporations and rich people ahead of the public interest of women, girls, marginalized populations, and the planet. And so those are the kinds of transformative changes that we need to make. Human rights have been used to achieve transformations throughout the course of human history. Think about the way the abolitionists used human rights to end the horrific practice of slavery. Think about the way the women's rights movement has really brought about transformative change over the last century by harnessing the right to equality. Think about the way human rights were used to bring about the end of apartheid in South Africa. The way that indigenous people are more and more effectively asserting their rights to their traditional territories to bring about changes in their life, but also changes that benefit all of us. And so I think that that's why I'm so passionate about the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, because I genuinely believe that it can be transformative in addressing the triple planetary crisis that jeopardizes the future of each and every one of us, each and every person we love, the children we love, the grandchildren we hope to have.
Thank you very much. All the pleasure to the rapporteur. As we continue, yes, Kathy, I see your. I just want to mention that yes, we really do have a role to play, like he says, and you, who has the voice and who has the capacity and the knowledge, can actually represent others in court in public interests. You can do what you call in your different countries, strategic litigation or public interest litigation, but this kind of litigation requires funding. This kind of litigation requires time. And so all hands on deck. We need to get to work. But before we do that, before we engage the legal processes in access to justice, as we have had, to represent the various voices, I think it's also good to acknowledge that our laws and the policies need to change. So right from this moment and this forum, we need to go back home and make the relevant changes so that we can empower people to access the various justice systems that are provided, change the laws, inculcate a culture of environmental protection and gender, and protect IPLCs within those laws and policies. And we will force change where it is not possible to just have a change without a bit of litigation. Thank you. Kathy?
So nice to hear from a lawyer. It's wonderful. First, this is my last day here, and I want to thank all the women who have shared. I will carry your messages forward, and I will definitely have them in my heart forever. So I was a W7 advisor to the G7 this year in Germany, and so we know it's going to take 186 years to close the income gap between men and women, and we know it's going to take 280 years to get all these laws into place to protect women across the planet. And I know it's making me shudder to think about it. And we have climate change and biodiversity, and this is threatening food systems. And our sister right here said women are dying. So okay, let me come back down to earth. Okay, so this could be an incredibly naive, out of the box thinking. And I hope this is the right place, and I have to have great courage to say it. We have so many Earth heroes, and we've seen it repeatedly, like even if you look in our own European history, like how people were starved off the lands in Scotland to make way for sheep, but people were starved off the lands to make way for sheep in Ireland. People were starved off the lands in South Italy for, economic purpose. I know that because that's in my family history. What forces people off the land is they can't. So we've got climate change, biodiversity laws, and they can't find their foods anymore. What do they need for that food? They don't need food. Maybe a little bit of money. So if you read the book, A Ministry for the Future by, they give basically to the land defender, to the land protectors, right in the book. Like it's set in the future. So I'm wondering if that, and I know there's private companies, like I saw it at the UN, and somebody introduced it to me last night in another session. Oh, what's stopping the UN from just giving money directly to land defenders to make sure they can eat? I mean, we're okay in Canada, maybe because we can go to our own governments, maybe. No, we can't still. So, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Like I've been to northern communities, like, $12 for one pepper. I mean, like, it's crazy, and it gets more expensive the more north you go. So, is there like any sort of basic income thing on the horizon anywhere in the UN scope? Thank you for letting me ask my question.
Thank you.
I'm one small flea on the back of the UN elephant, and so I don't know everything that the UN is doing. I do know in some humanitarian emergencies they do make cash disbursements to people, but I'm not aware of any program directed towards environmental human rights defenders. There is a terrific charitable organization based in the US called Give Direct that gives money directly to people in poor communities, but it's, again, not focused on environmental human rights defenders. But it might be worth getting in touch with them and suggesting it. Thanks for your question. And I think there's no such thing as a bad idea in terms of trying to think about creative solutions to the challenges that we face.
Thank you very much for that answer, and a good idea to follow up with Give directly. Ladies and gentlemen, may I ask the gentleman to speak? Gentlemen, we like hearing from you because we also represent the majority of the community in these decision-making platforms. Gentlemen, okay, as you think of a question or a comment, any other lady wants to give us a message of how they have done it in their country, or how they have promoted this right within their context? As you continue thinking, but it's okay.
David, you did mention that to make sure that you have a human rights lawyer always with you, which I do. I have Nancy Tobias Tirado. She is from Colombia, but she's based in Montreal and out of the UK. She works with the Guardian newspaper. All of the biggest the papers has helped me also with the special rapporteurs in Geneva, Switzerland, to get my story out there as well. And also in Montreal here, there's a wonderful, I have students all across Canada from all universities who are teaching and learning everything that you need to know. And so through that, they have formed a group called Research for the Frontlines in Montreal here. And Research for the Frontlines does everything and anything that I need for the work that I do. And that's why I really wanted to stress this out to you and go to your universities, speak to the students, tell them your stories, and they will help you research. So for example, they helped me now in February. They're going to be learning all about land assessments. And they learn about the atrocities of systemic racism for the film that I do. They've done the script for me, and all I have to do is go get the stories and do the filming now. Everything that I need, and so I've reached out. So I've got every university from Dalhousie to UVic in Canada here helping me do the work that I do. And the biggest one is McGill University here in Montreal, and they're called Divest McGill Students. And the students here, they take the uprise for all the stories and then all the actions that I need. And they are right now helping me even in this building. I need to have some things printed. They see me. Do you need a cup of coffee or something? They're there. And that's what they reach out, like what you mentioned, to make sure that you have a human rights lawyer. Seek them out. A lot of them do it for nothing, but do it for the gain of the people. And not for their own gain, not for their own pockets. They're not the government. They're here to help you. Thank you.
Sorry, we have one more minute.
Hi, my name is Dorette Touchon. I'm a professor at the University of Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Hi. I'm going to echo what you just said. We are partners. Academia is doing a lot of research. We have a lot of students. Often we don't know where to start. We have so many projects going on. But many of us, we want to help the community, we want to give back. We didn't get PhDs to just do theory. We actually develop projects. We have all different specialties. Use us. Reach out to us. Go on the website. We have our email addresses. Send us an email. So I'm going to extend that invitation to you because you're all from the same province. I work for public policy, so a bit of work in education as well. But reach out to your universities. I completely echo this call. We can help you with our students, but also with our research and expertise. And we want to be up there. We want to give back to the communities.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to request you kindly if you can just write your details.
Yeah, I can.
So that whoever wants to reach out to you can do that. Yeah. Thank you. Before I give Gina the floor, she has a lot of information from across the group. I would like to mention that with access to justice yesterday, I heard from Mariana that the seat at the table that you claim must not only be a seat at the table, that it must be functional, meaning that it must give you the voice and the capacity to actually speak about it, what you want to speak to. Maybe Ariana, after Tina has spoken, maybe you can just tell us how you explain that in your own way. But I was quite happy to hear that yesterday.
No, thanks. Thanks. I just wanted to, looking at, again, all the discussions that are going here, I see a lot of energy and a lot of fire, right? That's what we wanted to do, is building the collective. Again, as saying that we've come so far, not because of just going on this pathway alone. For our Women's Caucus members, is very diverse, including with UN agencies and academia. We're always talking about that gender issues, not just women's issues. So how do we really collaborate? And that's happening, and it's really very good to see more researchers, more agencies partnering and coming forward. So I think the way that I'd always tell people is, they say, Tina, this is great. And I'm like, yeah, but it's been a collective. It's been a collective process. It's been a collective stakeholder. It's been very diverse, and people who have come together for that. And also, reaching out, right? I think for that one, I definitely give a big thanks to David. Because you have special rapporteurs in the UN system, and David has been following the CBD post 2020 very close. So understand that aspiration and things there, but we also really need to scope out which other special rapporteurs are there and how can we, there's one on gender-based violence, we have indigenous people special rapporteur. Also taking the space, they're saying that David, thank you for opening that door, and being able to be in a hot seat is not easy, because we don't get access to reach. I don't think that how many people would have called them would have actually come and said, just have an open forum and not have a structured question. So for that, I definitely acknowledge that space that you've made, and that path for us to engage and work together is also really very rare. So I think let's also take the opportunity of seeing how we could, again, scope out, look at within our networks and vicinity of how we can start opening those other doors. The more collective agenda it happens within all the different spaces, it will just make our movement more stronger. So for that, I just want to set this forward as saying that having a special rapporteur here, okay, just come in and like, hey, I'll come in. Just saying that, just acknowledging that, thank you so much for that.
Let me just echo a thank you to you, Tina and Cecilia, for all the incredible work that you do, and for your willingness to have me come here and sit. I think thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us here and for sharing your stories. The courageous work that you do is a source of constant inspiration to me. To hear your stories firsthand like this is incredibly powerful. And my commitment back to you is that I'll do everything I can as the special rapporteur to amplify your voices. So, for example, tomorrow we have a ministerial breakfast on gender-based approaches to conservation. I'm going to go there. Most of the speakers are women, and which is quite appropriate for that type of forum, but somehow they let me onto the agenda. And so I will talk about the very things we've talked about here, the importance of protecting women human rights defenders, the importance of including gender equality in the biodiversity framework. All of these things, I'm just so privileged and honored to be able to use my position to amplify the things that you folks are saying. And the other thing I'll say to my brothers here is really important. I love the sisterhood, but the reality is we brothers have to change the way we act. We have to change the way we act. And that means for me as a guy, I know I've had to work on listening. We have to work on listening. We have to work on shutting up and listening. An incredible statistic I'll share with you, which I came across in my research for this report on women, girls, and the right to healthy environment. We're making real progress. The fact that there are so many women and girls here at the COP is terrific. Again, that's really inspiring that you're here in these forums. But even when there's equality in terms of men and women at COPs, so this was a study that was done by researchers at one of the recent climate COPs. They found that there was actually an equal number of women and men at the climate COP. That's a historic achievement. When it comes to who was talking on the stage, 75% of the airtime was taken by men and only 25% by women. And so, again, I'll just say, brothers, we can do better. We have to do better. We have to open up space for women, for girls, for people of gender diverse backgrounds. And that is on us to do. We can't expect our sisters to do all the work. We have to help with the heavy lift. So thank you all.
Just to mention that there are various avenues to get substantive justice, and one of them is about procedure. That is why it's good to see so many women in these processes, and it's also good to see so many women involved. That way you can have a voice at the time of decision making, so that in the end, we get the substantive justice that we seek. Not that we are the only ones, there are children and there are youth groups here. So let's take part in the processes. Kathy, one more.
Yeah, friend.
One phrase.
Yeah.
And then functional table. So that's Kathy, sorry, Ariana. And our young member.
Thank you so very much. I'm really glad to be here again and to see you once again at this event. And I think just in line of what you were saying, there's a difference between not having a seat at all at the table, having a seat at the table, and then having that good portion. A lot of the times it's broken because of structural problems. A lot of the time someone has broken that chair forward. And so I think that it is incredibly important to, as you said, recognize that while we're here, sometimes we don't get that voice. And to mention the multiple statistics about ways and water governance and different ways that we can change the way those systems are. It's really important to recognize and explore. And I commend you as someone who identifies as male to being willing to make that space and to amplify our voices in that way. So representation matters, language matters, and having that seat be functional and participatory, inclusive, and meaningful is really important. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, friends and colleagues. It was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I urge you, just like the professor, whoever is available to support the women in any way, kindly, please drop by this desk and we shall be happy to collect your details and share them with the rest of the group.
Yeah. Okay.
Where would it be shown?
Ah, we can't. We can't. Boy, it is down. Maybe it's supposed to be